Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we want to welcome you to the second Tuesday of the month Know Your Neighbor program. We want to welcome all of you who are joining us by live YouTube streaming. This will also be available in an archived edition on the Know Your Neighbor link on the Town of Bucksport webpage. It's my privilege to have Tracey here tonight. And Tracey is the executive director of H.O.M.E. H.O.M.E has a period between each one of the letters. And for those of you who are wondering, what does that stand for? It's Home Workers Organized for More Employment, which is how it started. 50 years now?
52.
52, all right, well, we'll say 52 years. So tonight, there will be a conversation, and then there'll be opportunities throughout this next hour for you to go to the center mic. We've decided that's probably the most efficient way for us to not only hear everyone who wants to ask a question, but also the camera is going to be on the mic, so we're not lost in space here with people speaking and can't be seen. So again, welcome. My name is Dr. Stephen York, and I serve as the Executive Director of Brown Hall Community Center. And so without any further ado, let's give a warm welcome tonight to our guest. All right. Tracey, tell us about H.O.M.E.
Well, I have to start with a correction. We actually just turned 53 in April. So H.O.M.E started back in 1970, and H.O.M.E originally was a crafters co-op. It was founded by a group of fairly radical Catholic nuns, and those of you who are familiar with that path of Catholicism, they were a wild bunch. And initially, they had a craft store on Schoolhouse Road in Orland. And that craft store was in what was called the Doorhouse Men's Shelter for many decades. That was the first building, and it's the white building you see on Route 1. So the idea behind the founding of H.O.M.E was for low-income people in Hancock County to create items in their homes and earn income through challenging winters and sell them in the craft store. As more and more people came to H.O.M.E, the sisters realized that folks needed assistance with writing. They needed employment. They needed help with food. And they were taking people home at night to their homes because some folks didn't have anywhere to stay. So our first homeless shelter opened in 1976, I believe. And then we opened another one much later than that. But all of the H.O.M.E has grown over the years. It's much more than a craft co-op. Now we've kept that piece of our roots there because running a program for people who are living in poverty does not mean you can't introduce them to the arts and crafts of Maine's tradition. So that's kept all the way through our history. Today, we're just a little organization of 47 employees, 4 homeless shelters, 18 units of transitional housing, and permanent housing in Bucksport, 7 units. We have a food pantry, soup kitchen, child care program, a sawmill, lumber yard, a single-room occupancy house in Ellsworth for folks coming out of jail, a learning center. There's a lot going on. So we've grown over the years, and each program has been developed in response to a need that's been presented over the years. One of the special things about H.O.M.E, special and challenging, is that H.O.M.E, we have a philosophy to hire and put people to the service of others that come through the programs. And so as a result of that, 17 of our staff, many of the management team, came to us first for help, and myself included. So that sets H.O.M.E a little bit apart from the other homeless shelter systems in the state. To put it into context, we have 37 shelters in the state of Maine that serve people experiencing homelessness, and H.O.M.E operates 4 of those. We only have 5 shelters in the state of Maine that serve families with children, and H.O.M.E operates 3 of those. So we serve about 3% of the homeless population in the state of Maine. And last year, our numbers were a little down, which is good and bad. We're not sure how accurate the count is. We served 171 people. And if you look at zip code data, most of those folks are from Hancock County. In addition to all of those programs, we have a really robust volunteer program, and we had for a long time a low-income house building program where we built 53 homes for low-income families. And most of those homes are in the hands of the original owners, and but several of those homes have come back into H.O.M.E.'s care, and over the last 2 years we've worked to rehab them and sell them again. We've stopped building houses now, and simply because the crisis before us is emergency shelter. And I was at a meeting today, and a good friend mentioned, we want to encourage people to go to their primary care physician, but we don't want to ignore that we need an emergency room. And H.O.M.E right now is serving as an emergency room for unhoused folks. So the house building is on pause, and we're reevaluating if we have capacity to do that well. We've done it for a long time, but it takes a lot of work to run a house building program in and of itself. So we're partnering with Habitat and land trusts to work on that.
The various shelters, and you'll see this in the annual report, which you'll take away, there's a good percentage of people who come for help and then end up with permanent housing. And tell us how that works.
So it's changed over the years. The last 4 years, what happens when somebody comes to shelter, the first 2 weeks, if you're homeless and you come, you're settling in. There's not a lot of programming happening. We give folks the space. Of course, we COVID test and make sure everybody's doing okay health-wise. Then we do what's called a housing assessment, and that's really just to assess barriers, because what we have in Maine, and in our county in particular, are a lot of folks who can self-solve homelessness. So they need a few weeks or a couple of months in a shelter and can get back on their feet. And then we have a group of folks who have bigger barriers. They may have mental illness, substance use disorder, criminal background challenges. And that housing assessment really just lets us know what level of care we need to step in. And if a person presents with a lot of barriers, and this is all to assess barriers to permanent stability. So if a person presents with a lot of barriers, they're assigned a navigator, and that navigator works with them for a year. Their shelter stay without COVID used to be around 45 days. We're in a housing crisis statewide, so the outflow is slower. But the navigator works with them on all of the barriers that I just mentioned, connecting with case managers, employment in some cases, clearing up credit in some cases, believe it or not. And then they also help that person apply for vouchers. In most of our clients need assistance with housing payments. So we connect them with a voucher. And then when they move out of shelter, and this is the best part of the program, our housing navigators, we have 2 in Orland and we have 2 in Ellsworth at the Emmaus shelter. And they'll follow the client for a year after they leave shelter, check in on them. Are you behind on your rent? Or check in with landlords, because it's, we also recognize that it's not an easy task for landlords as well. So housing navigation contributes to that. And last year, I know Dr. Yorkie was saying it was a great number, 33%, I believe, left for permanent housing. The year before, it was more than 50%. So that's folks coming into shelter or leaving with a permanent solution.
That's absolutely remarkable. Now, for those who may not know, could you tell us, I know where the Emmaus shelter is,
Right.
always wondered about it, but can you just tell us, it was formerly a post office?
Yeah, so that was the first time the nuns got in trouble. Yeah, not the last. The federal building used to be a post office in Ellsworth, and folks on the city council back in, I believe it was 89, that we first applied for the permit to get the shelter there. And they didn't want it on the corner of downtown Ellsworth. We won. And Sister Lucille ran that for decades before she retired, and it became a really wonderfully functioning shelter. It's a family shelter. It has 25 beds, and it's right on the corner of Main Street. It opened its doors in the 90s, so it took a long time for us to get approval and permission to have a homeless shelter downtown Ellsworth. It's great to have it downtown, and I know it's hard for folks to accept, but when you're in a shelter and you have no transportation access to anything, it's actually perfect to be close to services. That's what we want. As long as it's run well, it works for the community. So.
Now, you mentioned Sister Lucy.
Sister Lucille managed.
Sister Lucille, can you tell us about who she was?
So there's a few Sister Lucy and Sister Lucille.
All right, so I'm already lost.
You are. All right. So Sister Lucy was one of the founders of H.O.M.E, and she's still with us. She's retired. She's up at the farm. She's retired up there, and she does it. I haven't talked to her in a very long time. She's really not engaged directly in the work. I do carry her philosophy in my heart. She was a Carmelite nun, and she was asked to leave her order based on her work philosophy. Sister Lucille was a Sister of Mercy, is a Sister of Mercy, and she's retired to work in New Hampshire. Then we had Sister Barbara Hance, who passed away, and Sister Marie, who was my mentor, passed away several years ago. And she's the one who took me in when I came there and took me under her wing.
What year was that?
2004.
2004.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of your story you want to tell, but it's a long way from Australia. I'm not sure I even have the right accent there.
I can give the abbreviated version. I was raised by my mother and sister, and it was a fairly violent childhood, and they both died. I wound up in the United States, and I had come here for a summer job in California, and I found family here, and it took me 24 years to become a citizen. For the first 23 years, I was undocumented, trying to become a citizen. And so the sisters taught me everything that I know, and I became a citizen 4 years ago now. And so that's how I came to H.O.M.E. I found family there.
So at what point, what year was it that you actually got here at H.O.M.E?
I was a teenager. Oh no, when I came to the United States, I was a teenager. When I got to H.O.M.E, what was the question?
Well, how long have you been at H.O.M.E? I mean,
17 years.
17 years.
Right. I was in shelter briefly, and then I helped with the organization. So I took over 6 years ago, I believe. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I didn't plan it, but nothing at H.O.M.E was planned.
So that's really remarkable. Now, is the chair of our board the attorney that helped you with this process, or how did you get citizenship?
hard work. I just applied. I had another attorney,
I see,
and
yeah.
yeah.
The board chair is an attorney, and he sent his regrets. He couldn't be here tonight because he's working with people from Haiti, or Haitians, I guess, in the United States.
Yeah, he's an attorney in Bangor. And
Right.
he works with the blueberry farmers in Washington County to help folks with help connect the farmers with workers and make sure that's all done in the right way. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, I know that the peninsula is part of Hancock County. Catherine reminded me of that, but
Yeah.
It seems like you're somewhat reaching further than the local area, or not?
Well, it depends which program. So most of our shelter program is the exception. Our shelter program is open to, we cover all of Hancock and Washington County.
And Washington.
Yeah, there's no homeless shelter in Washington County. So we cover what you call Hub 8 in the state of Maine. There are 9 hubs in Maine for the shelter network, and we're in Hub 8. And so we're the only shelter provider in Hancock, Washington counties, except for the domestic violence shelters. We, with the food pantry, we serve a 12-town area, and that's guided by Good Shepherd.
Right.
And then, so we do reach Deer Isle, Stonington, particularly because there's no homeless services there, and oftentimes folks find themselves, most of our work there is diversion, and that's another program we have that I could spend a whole night on. That's to prevent homelessness at the front door, and that's sending a worker to say a guy, we had this recently, a guy's pipes were frozen, and the state programs can't respond quick enough to take care of him fixing those in time. So the most cost-effective and best way to serve this gentleman is to prevent him from becoming homeless, because he's got work on the island, and coming into a homeless shelter is about $1,800 a month. We would spend about $3,000 to fix his pipes, and he would be in shelter for 3-4 months maybe if he became homeless, versus us driving out to where he's at and assessing the situation and getting him back on track. That's the diversion program, and that keeps people who situational homelessness. It's something has happened in their life that would lead them to homelessness, and we can quickly solve that. And that keeps those crucial shelter beds open for people like the library has encountered who are chronically homeless, have big barriers, and really need to be in our care to get back on track. Because we only have 61 beds covering 2 entire counties, which is not a lot. It feels like a lot to me, but it's not a lot of beds for our counties.
Right. Housing is an issue. Affordable housing is an issue. And there's a remarkable book out, you may know about it already. It's called Down East. It's by Gigi Georges, which follows the lives of 5 young women in Washington County and how they were able to move into some successful, healthy ways of living. So it's interesting. You've got Washington County too, and there's a huge need. So at this point, I'm going to pause and look at the audience, and we'll have a few times when we'll give this opportunity to you. I know we have at least a couple of board members present. Dennis is here tonight. And I have to raise my hand. They cut me too. Just in the last annual meeting, and happy to be in it, as I'm sure Dennis is too. But so I'm wondering, is there someone that would like to kick off a question for Tracey? There's so much to cover, so much that she does. And I'm going to ask you to go to the microphone, and we'll turn it on, and the camera will be on. And So please address your questions to Tracey.
Tracey, as you know, I was involved in the wood bank program.
Right.
And as you well know, I turned it over to you. And I was curious, I haven't been over there for a long time, and I wondered how it's doing. That's question number one. And question number two is, what could you use? What, all of us, what can we do to help you? And what type of things do you need? And do you need wood too, by the way? And or equipment and volunteers.
Got it. All right.
Thank you, Paul. Would you answer those questions?
Sure. So the wood bank, great question. The wood bank has taken off. So last year, I think we served 17 families, Paul. This year, we're hoping to double it. We're getting away from the outdoor boilers ourselves on campus, and we're hoping to build a fence around the back of the sawmill and double our wood bank efforts. It's been a super resource. One in particular, a family, their house had a problem with their main heat source, and so the wood bank really is helping. There's a lot of state programs out there, and what people don't understand a lot is sometimes you can make a heat assistance appointment and not get it until March, and we know in Maine by March you've got some problems. So the wood bank really is a low barrier patch, and we're finding that the folks coming for help from the wood bank are employed folks, and they're just not earning enough to get by. So it's doing really well. I think we'll see it grow. We have a lot of folks donate to us. Right now, we have a lot of folks come across, if you're doing any tree work in your yard, we have a guy who can come to your house with his chainsaw and cut up some wood. But it's okay, great. So it's a great program. What do we need? It's a tricky question. I have to tell you, our staff has been hit really quite harsh this week with illness, so we're not sure where volunteers lay in this right now. So we're just playing cautious for now, but generally we're renovating the soup kitchen and the market stand. So if anybody's feeling like they want to cedar shingle a building, we're looking for help there. We're hoping to renovate the volunteer center, and we have 5 groups coming this year. We have volunteers who come just as an individual. We could use help with fence repair. We're spending most of our volunteer energy this year on our campus in Orland. We've rehabbed all of our shelters already and our place in Bucksport. The food pantry, anybody who's interested in delivering food boxes, that's always something we could use help with. And when the soup kitchen's back open, stay tuned, because we'll be looking for cooks to help with that.
Paul, follow up?
Tracey, I think with the price of oil,
Yeah.
whatever the heck it is now, I think it's $4.60 or something, and probably going up.
Yeah.
Is it now? I'm quite nervous about how many people are going to be have a fuel shortage this coming year, and that program, to me, if it can be expanded exponentially, I think it's going to be needed.
For sure, and I know the LIHEAP program has been expanded as well dramatically.
The LIHEAP.
But access to that takes longer than most Mainers have time to access, and so, yeah, I mean, for us, I think it would take hiring more people, unless we could get a band of volunteers over a scheduled time period with chainsaws. Maybe we could do that closer to September. So one thing we've done is we've cut wood the year before now. So folks are not getting green wood,
Right.
which is good, because their stoves are doing better. But that's great. If you want to we can get together and maybe have a wood cutting party, if anybody's interested.
Gee, I have never done that before.
Yeah, and our program's really low barrier. So if anybody is watching, we really, it's a one-page application. We just get some demographic information. It's one of our lowest barrier programs because it's not monitored by the government. So we
Great.
can say yes a lot.
So to those who are watching virtually by YouTube streaming tonight and those who are here, if they want to help, let's say in practical ways, like the wood bank, the best thing is to call what number?
469-7961.
So repeat that one more time and they'll...
It's 469-7961, and there's extension prompts to get through to different folks. You can follow the extension prompt to get to my number.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always hit 0 because...
I know.
Well, you know, the old saying, confession's good for the soul, right? I don't know if it's good for mine or not tonight, but anyway. It would seem also, if I may say so, that having this publication, which just came out last week, this time, which is the twice a year issued publication from H.O.M.E. And what struck me, honestly, Tracey, and I'm looking for another question while I'm talking, is the narratives are really powerful. It's one thing, I think you said somewhere, maybe it's in the annual report, that behind every number is a human person. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important, and the power of narrative is really captivating. You can read statistics, we can talk about, you know, 1 in 8 adults and 1 in 5 children suffer food insecurity in Maine. But it's something else to hear these stories, and not only stories of how people are being helped, but then how they're able to move on with their lives. And that's a really beautiful thing to see how the resilience is working in, which is why I mentioned Down East. It's a story of 5 young women who have had remarkable stories in Washington County. I'm looking for someone else who would like to ask a question, and I recognize our wonderful friend from the town library in Bucksport, newly back from vacation.
Yes.
Would you step up a little closer to the mic?
This is more of a, just a comment versus a question. I actually live right down the road from H.O.M.E. And we regularly see many of the people who are staying in the shelter walking through our neighborhood, and we've actually hired one to help us shovel, and he is now housed, which was really great news for us to hear. And also I just want to say that Tracey's leadership in terms of homelessness in this area has been key in helping me as a library director, because we have had several situations since I arrived that needed to have some sort of conversation, both not only with H.O.M.E, but also with public safety. And that partnership is growing, and I think it will continue to grow. But we are very, very fortunate to have H.O.M.E in our community. So,
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I'll take another question if there is one. Come up and please give us your name and then ask your question.
Yeah, I'm Ray Merrill from Orland. I was just wondering about the sawmill. It doesn't look like it's had to be ever used.
Yeah, so the sawmill hasn't been used much since we stopped the house building program. And we were discerning last year whether or not we could continue that. We have one sawyer, and he spends 40 hours a week on the wood bank and on wood for the whole campus. So it's a challenge. But we're going to keep the sawmill, and our hope is to have more staff come in and run it. But for now, since we're not building houses, we don't really have a market for the for the lumber. And the reason we don't have a market for the lumber, it's rough cut lumber. We don't have planing equipment. So what the lumber we're producing isn't pressure treated or planed. So it's not ideal for house building and things like that. What we are focusing on, and if you'd like to stop up sometime, is the shingle belt. This year we're beefing up production of the shingle belt, mostly because we have a whole building we have to reshingle. But we're hoping we can get into the market of selling cedar shingles at an affordable price. And so Clint, and the other part of the reality of it is, so I've been there 17 years, and the first 5 or 6 years I was there, folks were coming in who wanted to work in those types of trade. We're not seeing that now. We're not seeing folks who want to come in and work with wood, and we're finding that sad. But it is a reality. So I don't know what we're going to do when Clint's retiring. I hope he doesn't retire.
Well, I have a sawmill, so I've never been so busy in my life as I have the last couple of years.
Good.
Everybody wants lumber because it's so high in the store.
Yeah, for sure.
And
yeah.
You did have a business of sawing out logs for people too, which I do a lot of.
Yeah,
So-
we do. We still have sawed out logs, but only special order. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm just wouldn't mind having some help. I'm just overwhelmed with work, and
Yeah.
if you could do some of it, it wouldn't hurt me. Wouldn't hurt my feelings, any.
Okay. Well, we just got a truckload of cedar, so once we make that into shingles, we could move on to. On the we had some hemlock that we milled recently, but we just don't have stuff capacity right now. I hear you. It's good advice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, what I'm hearing from the audience is some interest in various programs, and I think Paul's question about what do you need, and I know we focused on the food bank and volunteers. Now, I know that there are 4 or 5 mission groups coming from different churches or organizations in New England to come this summer, and their task is going to be what? To rebuild what at this point?
So they'll be redoing the soup kitchen and the volunteer center. So we've doubled our food distribution, and so which means we have to double the space that we have to store food. So we've expanded, and that building was not doing well. So they'll be installing floors in the second building of the volunteer center. A lot of them will be doing cedar shingles. Some folks will be doing some jobs around campus.
So I know that at least 3 of the groups, maybe there are 4, I don't know, Johanna would have to tell me, but we have provided Brown Hall because you don't have any place to feed these groups that are coming in. So they will be having breakfast and supper here, and you have people coming to cook and bringing food and whatever.
Right.
And we have the dates, but this is just another investment in ways that we can be practical in supporting something. And you said to me, well, these people have skills. How about if you have them do some work at the church or at Brown Hall? And I said, well, if they got that much energy, let them keep working over on the campus.
Yeah, I mean, we cut 100 cord of firewood a year to heat all of our shelters, and we've got a 2-person crew to do that. So some of the groups will be working on firewood, probably the June groups. It's a bit hard in August to split logs, but yeah, we have a lot of work.
So there are different ways to contribute, folks, to the support of this, and we haven't even talked about money, but, beyond that, I think it's just worthy of our consideration. And I think probably to make an informed decision on where to contribute or how to become a volunteer is to take home the annual report and really read it. I know there are annual reports, and then there are annual reports, but this is this is just a spectacular report of what is being done. And for those of you who are viewing this by way of YouTube, if you would like a copy of the H.O.M.E Inc. report for 2022, if you would like to get a copy of this time, if you call my office at 469-3333, Brown Hall will send you a complimentary copy of this at no expense to home. It will help you to make the kind of decisions, perhaps, or investment that will make this work go even further. So I'm looking now at another question, and we've had some good questions so far. Or comments. Would someone like to move next on this? We're in good shape.
Sounds
You guys are just a real cooperative. That was my little assistant minister, by the way, who just left. He gets upset with me if I don't let him have the microphone. So his name is Alex, and that was his mother, Johanna, and she's my executive assistant. So there are opportunities both for people from other parts of New England to come in and help. But it would seem to me that the real opportunity for locals to become involved would be absolutely critical. So you mentioned that you landed here, but you went first to California. Where were you in California? I'm just curious.
I was in Santa Cruz.
Santa Cruz, yeah. I was in the Bay Area doing work once. But how on earth did you find Bucksport, Orland? I mean, would you
That's a long story.
go with a globe and see?
No. I landed in Bangor for a while, and then I came to Bucksport. Yeah.
And that's quite a remarkable story of how you have yourself lead by example, and your own story is very, very powerful. When you were building houses, which I hear you're not doing right now, how did that work? I mean, I saw a story on the film clip at the annual meeting where a woman that I have some familiarity with, because she came here, to worship for a while before she relocated to another town. And she has a house. So how did you do this? Did you have a contracting crew working for you?
No, it was all done with volunteers.
Sort of a Jimmy Carter Habitat style?
It was kind of like Habitat, similar to Habitat.
Yeah.
And it was done with volunteer labor over the years. And some volunteer groups, for example, from Connecticut would come, and they have engineers or carpenters on their crew. And the challenge was it took us about 3 years to build a house, and so it was just very challenging to keep up with that pace when you're relying on volunteer labor that only comes in the summer. Like we've realized now, we've renovated and rehabilitated 4 shelters and the soup kitchen and the house in Bucksport, all in 2 years. And so, because we've received funding and hired local contractors, and so the pace of volunteers building houses is much different, and I think that was one of the bigger challenges for us. And so we would build the house with volunteer labor, and sell the houses to a low-income family for what it cost to do that. So for land acquisition and things like that. But the land is on. We partnered with another nonprofit that runs a land trust, and the houses are on the land trust. The idea behind that the sisters had was to keep the land out of speculation and in perpetuity for poor people. And so that was from 80s until about 6 years ago. And what's shifted now that makes it more complicated is that low-income people, they used to be able to afford to live in rural areas of Maine independently in these houses. That's not the case anymore. A car breaks down, and pretty soon, if they live 10 miles out in Dedham, their whole world falls apart. And so we're finding that while the philosophy was to keep folks in rural areas in houses, it became really challenging when other barriers landed on their doorstep. And so we're really reevaluating that. If we get back into it, I think it will be in a more a location where there's bus, public transportation, and healthcare centers and grocery stores. And so if their car breaks down, they're not spiraling into a bigger challenge. That we've had to reshift the program. And folks aren't getting more mortgages as well. So we're also looking at that. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you about the food pantry, because I don't think that a lot of people around these parts know about that and how it works and how to contribute to it. I'm going to also then go to audience if there might be a final takeaway question, or Dennis, if you want to say something about your coming in on board, or I'm just trying to give you a heads up if you want to say something. And so I want to talk about the food pantry. I want to go back to the audience, and then I'm going to ask you this question. So I'm going to give you time. As they would say in teaching, I'm front-loading this. What are your dreams, or is there a dream for home? You know, where do you see us?
Great.
Okay, so I'm going to give you time.
That's not that hard. Sorry.
You know, she warned me she was going to give me a hard time because I just joined the
I
board.
dream all the time.
All right, but you know, you did say you were going to slap me around a little, so thank you, Tracey. So how does the food pantry work? Who's eligible?
Sure. So
What's available?
Okay, I'll do Sky local, right? So there's 9 food pantries in Hancock County. We have 1 and 2. And we're the only food pantry that's open 4 days a week. And so to access the food pantry, right now, we're asking people to make appointments. We're in a little bit of a bump in the road. And you can get 2 food boxes a month, and you have to fall within the federal poverty guidelines. We're not very strict on that. But let's face it, most folks coming to food pantries aren't, there's nothing to make of coming to a food pantry, so we're fairly lax on that. We give out, our food boxes have protein, meat, if folks eat meat. Sometimes we have food for pets, and you can get up to 2 food boxes per month. We also have an emergency food box program, and that's if somebody comes into shelter at 11 o'clock at night and there's a Hancock County Sheriff who needs something for someone, we can access those food boxes. And then we have a produce program similar to what happens here, or used to happen here. We rescued 118,000 pounds of food last year from 2 grocery stores. And those are put out for the public on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And on Wednesday, they're at Bucksport Community Concerns. And in Orland with us, the food is out from 9 to 12:30, and folks can just come freely and take what they need. And there's no income barrier to that. If you need the food, take the food. And it's all good food. They take it off the grocery shelf the day before, and Clint, you'll see a home van. Clint, our Sawyer, he's the one who does the food. He drives and picks up the food, and he puts it out every day. He does that. And then we also have a food pantry in Ellsworth, and so you can access the food pantry by calling 469-7961 and following the extension prompts as well.
Go to 0.
And go to 0. You'll get somebody at 0, yeah. We got fancy somewhere.
I'm just giving
Yeah.
it back to
Yeah.
you a little tiny bit.
Yeah,
Tracey.
yeah.
So, let's get clear. It's open Monday, Tuesday, Thursday.
It's open 5 days a week, the food pantry.
The food pantry's open.
I said 4. It's actually open 5 days a week. We expanded. And it's open in the morning from, Maureen, if you're watching, I'm sorry, I think it's 9 to 11:30, and then again from 1 to 3 in the afternoon. So there's a little break in between for stuff.
Right.
That's Monday through Friday. As well, every single morning from 9 until 12:30 on the craft store porch, we have produce, baked goods, all kinds of things as well, free to the public. And so that it's 2 different programs, but both offer food.
I know you said something about 2 boxes a month, but
Yeah.
do you figure out or bring into the equation the number of people living in a household?
Absolutely, yeah. So if you have a family of 6, you probably end up with 2 boxes that day, or maybe not 2 boxes, but food that would feed a family size, right? So,
Okay, so it is
yeah.
proportional.
Yeah, it's proportional for sure. And we try to cater to diets if we can. We can't always, but it's proportion, yeah.
And I heard you say earlier in the broadcast that you are looking for people who would be willing to help with food delivery or...
Yeah, we have a delivery program, but it's our Sawyer is doing the delivery. We'd love to get him back to the woodwork. So folks who are shut-ins, or if you've got COVID and you need your food box delivered, we still do that.
Right.
But we'd like to, when we get to the Dream Talk, that's part of it.
I'm
Yeah.
coming to the
Yeah.
Dream Talk, okay? Dennis or anyone else would like to make a comment? Yes, and go to the microphone so we can hear you and see you. I know that you love that, but
I'm gonna get mad at you.
that's all right. I'm taking it right and left tonight.
What I wanted to ask is, if I was to deliver food, would I have to lift the boxes?
I would say if you couldn't, no. So we'd probably, at that point, we'd ask the caller if they needed assistance and if they could lift it out of the vehicle for us. But if we had somebody delivering food, we wouldn't give that person a schedule of if they had to lift. And our Sawyer would deliver that one.
Yeah, I'd certainly be glad to deliver things, but I'm really not good at lifting heavy things.
Got it. Yeah, and a food box can weigh about 50 pounds if
Yeah.
it's loaded. Good point. Yeah, and we're flexible, and it's not beating down the doors, so we certainly could. Mm-hmm. If anybody had lifting restrictions, we could ask the person at the house, can you lift that out of the car? Yeah.
Thank you. It's a very good question. Another question or comment? Dennis, would you, as a new board member, like to say anything?
Yeah.
No? Okay, that's fine. I don't mean to put you on the spot. Lisa?
Yes, just a quick question. We
Speak
had a
into the
program
mic.
where we had a program in Vermont where people who had excess produce could donate it to food shelters. Is that something that H.O.M.E accepts?
We do. We have a gleaning relationship with Healthy Acadia,
Okay.
and absolutely. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Great.
That's good to know. Lots of ways to be helpful. This is going to be last call, non-alcoholic, of course, but last call if anyone has a question or a comment or an observation. And here comes my good friend, Linda Heyman. And
I am so impressed with everything I've heard. The thing that I worry about, or am concerned about, is the lack of publicity. I don't know where to find information about you. I think you ought to have someone create a video, get on public television. Am I just missing that because I watch public television and I haven't seen much about you? But
Yeah.
I do think you could be a major article in a magazine.
Yeah.
And
That's a place somebody could help. We were in the New York Times. Our Wood Bank made the New York Times 2 years ago. So that we were pretty proud of that. Clint was pretty proud of that. I've name dropped Clint a lot tonight. I hope he's watching. It's a really good point, and it all comes down to we are running at such staff capacity right now with everything we're doing. Exactly. Yeah. We should get out more, and we're hoping we can spread the word. Coming here is super helpful, and I do a lot of speaking and. At a lot of different churches. I've spoken all around the peninsula and throughout the county. I've spoken in Chicago about rural poverty in Maine. But we certainly need to do more, and I appreciate that feedback. That's helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I'm hopeful that this is a beginning to really raise consciousness in this area, because it's really a wonderful opportunity for us to become more knowledgeable. And I think there's a gentleman who came into my office the other day wanting to contribute something to food pantries and whatever, and he sat down. I had a lovely conversation, gave him a copy of the home report, which he took with you, and he said, I've driven by that for years, and I didn't really know what it was. And I really do think this is an understated story, and, one of my hopes is that Linda's comment is something we can even think about possibly at the board level. What do we need to do to make this? And I hear you say that you need the staffing, but also if there's a cadre of volunteers who will respond, and I'm talking to those who are watching by way of the internet too. That would be helpful. Okay, we're going to wrap up with this question, which you surely told me you already knew what it was, so go for it, Tracey.
Yeah, so our dream for home, when we first, when we took over from our founder, they had been at the helm for 46 years, and taking over from any founder presents challenges and changes. And so we had some work to do really to fix up some of the buildings that we already had. And that hard work now is coming to an end. All of the buildings have been rehabbed. We had to focus on what we felt was not doing well, and we were struggling in the shelter department. We weren't serving enough people. Our buildings were falling apart, and we had some big problems. We had a substance use problem that was just slamming our state. So we've managed to take care of those programs. My dream for home now would be for us to get back to the roots part of our work, where we've renovated and we've gotten all of the crafters back. So we have the stained glass studio open again. We have weaving, basket weaving happening. We have quilt making happening. We have pottery happening. We've rehabbed all of those buildings, put green, we've put heat pumps and solar arrays on the shingle mill. We're revamping that. We want to bring the wood production back, and so we really want to get back to those cottage industries. But we really needed to take care of the wound first, and that was the basic needs, responding to the crisis that was before us, and that's what was before us. So now that is settled, we'd like to get the campus back to a thriving place for folks to come and participate. And it serves the purpose of, with folks in shelters as well, because there's no better way for us to get to know our neighbor who's experiencing homelessness or substance use disorder or poverty than working side by side with them in one of the mills or in an art studio. That's where the work happens. They don't want to be in my office. They don't like that. They'd rather be painting in Julia's office and talking about what they're going through. So that's my vision for home, is to get back to to its history, now that we've taken care of the basic emergency response, we've got that handled. And we're not seeing folks on our waterfront because we're here. We're doing that. We're stopping the crisis. So now we want to get back to the fun part of the work as well, and build bridges and create and work. We're looking for people.
I've mentioned the chair, who's an attorney, Michael, but I want to also make everyone aware tonight that Susan Lessard, our town manager in Bucksport, is the treasurer of H.O.M.E. and has...
Yeah, they keep me in line. It's a tough crew.
I'm trying to close this out. Okay. So again, a couple of things before we go off the air tonight. Those of you who are watching who would like a copy of the community report or the newsletter, call my office. My executive assistant is Johanna, and the number is 469-3333. And we will be happy to mail this out to you as a contribution in support of H.O.M.E. Secondly, before you leave, I hope you take a copy of this with you, and think about sharing. I know there are some couples here tonight. So maybe if you can find someone who would benefit from this information, just because we know about it or don't know about it. I think this is so professionally done. It's just marvelous. Go ahead.
So the woman who produced this came to us homeless with her husband, both in recovery. So that's just an example of putting people to the work that come.
So we have a number of copies for those of you who are present. I'm going to have them here. And Tracey, if you will perhaps, at the end of this session, just make sure that as people approach, that would be a good thing. I want everyone to leave with a copy of this. I do mean everyone. And if you already have a copy or you already know this stuff, then take it with the intention of passing it on, because this is a very important outreach for this area. I want to mention that on the second Tuesday of each month, we do Know Your Neighbor here in Brown Hall, and we're working on a very vibrant program for the summer months, and we are glad that all of you have been able to join us. At the conclusion of the session, I'm going to invite everyone to, if you can, hang out, and there's all kinds of wonderful, healthy food over there on the table. I might make an exception to the cookies, but anyways, there's plenty of stuff there, and if you would like to contribute something to the cost of this, that's provided by some well-intentioned people here, but it helps cover the cost for the next time around. So I just invite you, but if you don't have any money, that's fine. Finally, on other Tuesday nights, as many of you know, my hero, Wendell Berry, we talk about one or two of his short stories every week at 7 o'clock to 7:30, and it's a lot of fun. We laugh. There was a story last week. I'll not talk about it, but anyways, it's the one, well, you can ask me later, and I'll tell you what it was. I have one copy of this left tonight. So it's $20, see me, or see Jeanette. Maybe Jeanette, you can handle this for me tonight. That would be great. The library is receiving from Catherine and I a copy of Winslow Homer's the biography of Winslow Homer. Bill Cross was a man who called me last summer and said, I didn't know who he was. He just said, do you have could we use the bathrooms? And I said, come on down. And he came to my office, and he's a scholar connected to Yale, and he wrote a major tome, newly published tome on Winslow Homer, which is beautifully illustrated. And the story behind that is this: there's a Bucksport connection. Winslow Homer's mother was born here in Buckstown, and it's all in there, and her family was members of this historic church before they moved away. So I just want to say that I thought about giving this to a friend for a birthday present. I thought, no, he'll read it and it's all over with. I thought, what a better place for Catherine and I to place this book, but at the Buck Library with our wonderful library director.
We appreciate it, and I will get a catalog tomorrow, and it will be available.
So all of you can read it, but it's a remarkable story and well insulated. And the bulk of the story is about Winslow Homer, but his roots were here in Buckstown. So I want to pass that on to you. We want to thank those of you who have joined us by way of the internet, and this will be archived on the Town of Bucksport's webpage. And if you go to Experiencing Bucksport, somewhere on the list is the Know Your Neighbor programs, and they are archived, and we will be also promoting this through social media. And now, without further ado, we would like to thank our guest, and let's give her a good warm. Thank you for joining us. This has been Dr. Stephen York, Know Your Neighbor, and this is a good cause. Thank you so much.